Hello, I'm Father Timothy Matkin with the Rector's Rambling for Ascension Day 2020. And today I want to talk about the Ascensiontide Novena. And I think a wonderful resource, a background story to begin, is with the reading that is used as the first lesson for First Evensong on Ascension Day. First Evensong is when you have the vigil right before the feast day. So on Wednesday before Ascension, you have Evensong for Ascension. And the first reading comes from 2 Kings chapter 2. And it's the wonderful goodbye story where Elijah has a protege named Elisha. Always a challenge when you're reading that in public to convey the difference between the two because their names are so close. But Elijah is saying goodbye to his protege. He knows that he's going to be called home to God. And they're in Gilgal first, and Elijah gets word, and he says, I think I need to go to Bethel. Elisha, it's been nice knowing you. Good luck. See you some other time, I don't know. And so Elisha is that dedicated, loyal servant, and he says, look, as the Lord lives, as you live, you still got time, and I'm going to spend all that time with you. I'm going to be with you wherever you go. So they end up going together to Bethel. And when they get to Bethel, there's resident prophets in all of these little towns called the sons of the prophets. And they pull Elisha aside and they say, hey, do you know what's going on here? Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master home pretty soon? And he says, yeah, I know. Don't say anything about it. Just leave it be. Well, Elijah says, I guess trying to get rid of Elisha again, he says, I think I need to go maybe to another town. Let me go visit Jericho. Maybe that's where God is going to call me home. And Elisha again says, look, as the Lord lives, as you live, I'm going to stay with you to the bitter end. He says, okay, all right. So they both go to Jericho. Same thing happens. Sons of the prophets there, they pull Elisha aside and they say, hey, look, do you know what's going on? The Lord's going to take your master away from you. And he says, yes, I know. Don't say anything about it. And so again, I think Elijah's trying to get rid of the little guy, and he says, I think I might be called to go somewhere else now. Maybe I'll just wander out into the wilderness. I'm going to go across the Jordan River here, and I'm just going to start walking, and God will take me whenever he takes me. And again, Elisha doesn't want to give up on him, wants to stay there to the very last moments, and so he goes with him. And of course, the prophets at Jericho are very intrigued by this, so they go out to watch what's going to happen. And very interestingly, when they get up to the Jordan River, they probably all start to place their bets and say, well, what's going to happen now? And Elijah takes off his mantle, and the mantle is kind of the sign of his authority as a prophet. And he rolls up his mantle sort of like a staff, and like Moses striking the waters in the Red Sea and they part, he takes his rolled up mantle and he strikes the waters, and the waters part. And Elijah and Elisha walk through to the other side, and then the river starts to flow again. And the prophets stay there and they watch what's going to happen. So they're just going to stay there and see all that they can see, what's going to happen on the far side of the river. And they're walking, and Elisha wants to succeed his master in his ministry. And he asks for that prayer intention. And so he says to Elijah, can I inherit a double portion of your spirit? Which is to say, can I inherit your ministry and your authority and power to exercise that ministry? Can I take your place when you're gone? And so Elijah says, well, if you see me while I'm taken, then the Lord will grant you that blessing. And if not, then not. And as they're walking and talking, they're separated by chariots of fire, and Elijah is taken up into heaven. And Elisha, the protege, sees this, and he says, my father, and Elijah's mantle drops. And Elisha picks it up, and he starts to head back. And of course, all these prophets from Jericho, they're still watching. They are probably amazed seeing Elijah go up into heaven, but they're saying, well, what's going to happen now when he gets back to the river? Is it going to split apart again? Is he going to have the same power and authority as Elijah? And so when they get there, he sees that Elisha, the protege, takes Elijah's mantle, and he rolls it up like a staff, and he strikes the river, and the waters part. And Elisha walks through to the other side, And so the prophets conclude, this has shown us now that power and authority of Elijah, his mantle, now rests upon Elisha, his protege, and he will continue that ministry. Well, what does that have to do with ascension? Well, of course, the big obvious connection is somebody going up into the sky, into heaven. But there's more to it than that. Because of this vigil of prayer, this novena, this 9-day vigil of prayer between Ascension and Pentecost, Jesus asked his followers to go back to Jerusalem and pray. Pray for the promised outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And of course, we know that happened on what we call the Feast of Pentecost. And in Pentecost happened, there were tongues of fire that came down on the apostles' head, and they went out into the streets and they prophesied and they spoke in tongues in languages that they didn't even know to communicate the gospel. And Peter preached the great sermon on Pentecost, and 3,000 people were converted. And so people were able to see and conclude that the ministry of Jesus is now continuing in his church. The ministry that Jesus exercised is continuing with the apostles. And so what we see with Elijah and Elisha, we also see with Christ and his church. So that's what we're praying for in this Ascensiontide. The power and the blessing and the gift of the Holy Spirit to continue the ministry of Christ in the world as his body, his mystical body, on earth, in heaven, and the church expectant. At our church, we have a little handout to help you do that. And I'll put a link to an online version below if you'd like to check into that. You can find these in the narthex if you come to join us at St. Francis Anglican Church in Dallas. You can check us out at stfrancisdallas.org. We are now open for public worship, and so we will encourage you to like and share, and see you there. God bless.